Ireland is a very temperate place, and we usually are the land of where it's not extreme. So it isn't for the rest of the world. It wouldn't be that warm, but it's just that we don't have air conditioning. All our buildings are kind of built to retain heat, so it's exceptionally warm in Dublin, especially given the fact that it's really warm at midnight. That is surreal.
It's about 35 degrees, am I right?
No, not even that. Not even that. It's about 28 degrees.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I think Asia country is about 35. I just see the weather reports.
Yeah. It'd be usually for this time of the year, it'd be about like 18 to 20. So an 8-degree jump isn't much for a lot of people, but it's quite considerable in Ireland, I guess. That's always interesting when we get a mini heat wave like this.
Yeah, I mean, all right, just to introduce. All right, okay, I'm from Malaysia, and then Malaysia is actually it's all year summer. It's about averagely 28 to 35 degree every day. But then the difference is that we are not dry heat. We rain, and then it's actually wet heat, which means we can survive with that. It's not like Middle East dry heat, which you suffer. So yeah, that's the thing. and there are cases that foreigners saying that, oh, their country is very hot during the summer, this and that. Then we kind of like have a joke saying that we are all year summer. When
I was in Malaysia, certainly for somebody like me from Ireland, I mean, it's a beautiful country, but yeah, it was every time I stepped outside felt very, very warm.
Yeah. All right.
It's like going into a sauna.
Yeah. All right. Let's start the podcast. All right. So, first of all, thank you for joining us. And then, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, lovely to have the opportunity to chat to you today, Jake. My name is Colum. I am based in Dublin, Ireland. I'm originally from Cork, which is about 2.5 hours from Dublin and down south. Living in Dublin for about 15 years. I work in higher education. I have worked in higher ed for about 15 years in different institutions and different places. Currently work in Dublin City University. My work really in the sector has always been with international students. I'm passionate about education. I have a higher ed podcast, and I love sports. I have been a big sports fan for forever, and American sports in particular. So I have an NFL podcast as well. Those are kind of two of my main interests. Outside of that, love getting to live music. So the pandemic has been really tough, not being able to go along to any concerts or shows. But I have been doing a lot of hiking and walking over the past year, certainly.
All right. So, talking about the university, are you still with the university doing the administration?
Yeah. Yeah, I am. I am. So, still working at DCU with international students. So, I suppose kind of involved in pretty much all aspects of the international student journey. So I would attend recruitment events, which is why I was in Malaysia last year in January 2020, and meet with prospective students, talk to them about DCU. I'd then be involved in terms of helping students to, if needs be, to make a visa application. Now, for students from Malaysia, they don't need a visa for Ireland. They register after they arrive. But I would be involved in the orientation process, the integration process. One of the things that I used to love doing in the pre-COVID days was walks around Dublin, because it was a great way to introduce students to Dublin and to allow them to get to know one another. And I started that a number of years ago. And the first 2 years, it was kind of small enough numbers. We'd have, 10, 15, 20 students. And then it began to grow. And I still remember the first time I was totally caught unaware one weekend, went along, organized this walk, and we'd more than 160 students show up. And I had been expecting 20. We completely took over the train, and we actually ended up in the local newspaper of the area that we went hiking in because there were so many of us. So I do that side of things, involved in assisting students with their immigration when they are in Ireland, and I suppose even kind of keeping in touch with them just to see how they get on. So still doing that, hopefully being able to welcome students back to Ireland again this September. Last year obviously we had some students who did come to Ireland, but a lot of students studied remotely, because even for those students who came to Ireland, whilst they might have been able to use campus to go to labs in the library, on occasion, there wasn't any teaching. All teaching was done remotely. So I really felt for students, particularly international students, because you come to experience a culture and to experience people and to meet people. And can you imagine flying, thousands of miles, landing, and then it being so difficult to have the opportunity to meet people? Because meeting people in university is just, usually it's going along to an event and meeting somebody on the periphery, but it's so difficult to do that in the online world, particularly because I feel that what COVID did was it removed spontaneity. Everything had to be organized. And it was like being in a Zoom room and being put in the spotlight. And suddenly it was like, right, Jake, tell these 40 other people in the Zoom room about you and about your interests. And that's very tough for a lot of people, particularly when you're younger and in university. So I think hopefully we all learned lessons, and there are things that worked really well and that we can take with us, and maybe improvements, particularly on the admin side of things. But I do think from talking to students, they miss the social aspect the most. They'll tell you that the academic side of things, that can work. The admin side of things and the support side of things, that can work online, but that social piece, that was key, that was missing. So I'm really hopeful that with the vaccine rollout here, it will allow us to have a more traditional academic year for 2021-2022.
Yeah, fully understand. As you mentioned, you previously last year you actually in Malaysia in one of the education show. May I know what which show is that? Because myself is actually I'm doing event management.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was in January. So I actually flew out there on on New Year's Day. And it was in KL, and I think it was a star event. What it was called. It was quite a big event. There were lots of universities from all around the world there, and met quite a number of students. And then I was in KL for the best part of a week, and then I went down, left KL, went to some other areas, and came back to KL for probably another 3, 4, 5 days. So altogether, I was probably in Malaysia for about 3 weeks.
Yeah, I think it's the Star Education Fair, something like that. Yeah, and I think you went. I think the next show might be Penang or Sabah, some place like that. I forgot. But if you mention Star, yes, the Star Education Fair, yeah, that's the main education fair, or the big one that we usually will go. Yeah. So yeah, as you mentioned, what's the percent, or how many Malaysian actually choose Ireland or your country as a location to go for their university?
Well, Ireland has had a long history of welcoming Malaysian students. So it actually goes kind of all the way back to the 60s or the 70s, I believe, particularly in relation to medicine. So I've worked in a number of, I suppose, institutions where the medicine was one of the big subjects, and we always had a significant number of students from Malaysia. And Penang is I know that the university there has an agreement with some of the Irish institutions, so some of the students will do some of they'll begin their studies in Malaysia, and they will do, I think it's maybe the first 2 years, potentially 3 years, and then they will come to Ireland to complete their final 3 years before returning back to, I guess, practice medicine in Malaysia. So I suppose I've seen students from Malaysia come to Ireland even when I started in the sector 15 years ago. But Ireland, why, has we're known as a friendly and welcoming place, but there wasn't a concerted effort to recruit international students until until about 2010, I feel. So while there were international students here in the period obviously before that, and as I said, from the 70s, you had the medical students. I think since 2010, over the last decade, you've seen it grow in a number of different areas. So it's no longer just medicine that we see students from Malaysia come to Ireland for. They now come to Ireland for any number of different topics. So we would have students come to study engineering. Ireland has become a real tech hub in Europe, and a huge number of companies have their European headquarters here. And because Ireland offers a stay back option, and all our master's programs are 1 year, that can be quite attractive, because you do a 1 year, master's program, you get your academic qualification, and you have the ability to stay back and work guaranteed for 2 years, and potentially get a work permit and allow you to stay on. So I have definitely seen a growth in the number of students from Malaysia coming for that tech side of things. The people from Malaysia seem to be very smart, very tech savvy, so that's an area. But also in other areas as well, certainly on some of our business courses, and also in humanities and social sciences. And we would have a significant number of students from Malaysia coming to carry out their PhD research in Ireland as well, be that in a full-time capacity where they get their qualification from an Irish institution, or even just to carry out research for 6 months or a year. So I couldn't put an exact figure on the percentage, but I can tell you that a number of institutions in Ireland have Malaysian student societies. So that will tell you there's a significant number where there is enough to form a society and to kind of get together and celebrate Malaysian culture. And that was always lovely, and nice for me to be part of as a staff member, to be invited along to many of the cultural celebrations and be part of that. So that was always really wonderful. So I think there has been a decently long history of Malaysian students coming to Ireland to study.
Yeah. Talking about the medical side, of course our Malaysian is always going out to overseas for the medical studies, and I will say the main location that I know is Russia and India, because India is affordable. At the same time, you have a lot of opportunity to actually get your hands dirty, because basically accident that happens every day. People are there for you to do experiment, and for medical, today I learned something. It's actually Ireland. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it has. It's definitely been a piece, and you would see a significant number of, say, even Malaysian doctors in Irish hospitals. Because they maybe before going back to Malaysia, they might spend a year or two on the wards in Ireland. So yeah, that wouldn't be uncommon either.
Yeah. And yeah, I think all right, for doctors that finish their study and then when they want to come back Malaysia to practice in a private hospital, they will need to go through a probation period in the government hospital. That's the SOP, because the government want to see are they qualified. So the pay might, or the benefit might not be that good from the government hospital, because it's under the government. Yeah, that's why a lot of doctors that I know, like some of my friends, they actually did what they did in your country, which they, after finish their study, they will continue working in that country. So yeah, that's like a common trend that is happening all over the world. Especially the economy in Malaysia and the political is not that sustainable, or it's not that good. So yeah, a lot of people thinking of leaving the country and looking for a better life, which is fair. I mean everyone should look for a better life, right? So yeah, it's kind of like a trend. Ireland is a place that people will do that. At the same time, a lot of Malaysian, they are also going to a country like Taiwan. They're going to a country like Japan. Yeah. So yeah, it's a common trend that we can see happening right now in Malaysia. Unfortunately or fortunately, but that is what it is. Yeah. And for the IT, yeah, Malaysia, I would say, our country is a weird country, I would say. Singapore always, be on top of us, as we know. See, people will say, Asia country is Singapore. But the thing is that Malaysia, like for example, the English test, we are actually getting higher score than Singaporean. And then for IT side itself, we are also the main hub for quite a number of companies. Yeah. Maybe Google, they moved to Singapore. However, in Malaysia, we also have headquarters for quite a lot of tech company. And the USB that we are using right now, the pen drive.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's actually invented by a Malaysian.
I didn't know that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So we do have a lot of talent in the country. But the thing is that we need to embrace them. We need to appreciate their effort. As we can see, a lot of Malaysians, they can't, because of the whole political climate, is unstable. And people might not have the appreciation for these people. They actually go out from the country and they look for better opportunity in overseas. Yeah, like the James Wong, the Fast and Furious director, or the Annabelle movie director, he's actually he is actually considered as Malaysian. However, the parents moved to Australia, moved to United States when he's a child, because his parents are looking for a better life. Yeah, so there are a lot of people that have talent. However, because of the whole situation in Malaysia, so they kind of go out from the country. Yeah.
Yeah, well, certainly. I suppose talent people always look for opportunities. It would be great if they can find them in Malaysia. But I can attest to the fact that people from Malaysia are very smart, very talented, and always really warm and friendly whether I meet them in Ireland or on my travels around the world, or indeed in Malaysia itself.
Yeah. I mean, they have to look for the opportunity. Yeah. Right. Talking about the COVID, the vaccination situation, as I understand, Ireland is one of the fastest COVID injection country. Yeah, so I think it's the top 3 right now. So is it like almost everyone have their dose?
Yeah, so we started off really slowly, and it took a long time. Been incredible. I would say if you were to look at the willingness of people to take the vaccine in Ireland, maybe in comparison to some other countries. The fact also probably that we are using mainly Pfizer and Moderna, which have the shorter in between time rather than AstraZeneca. And Ireland seemed to make the decision to go with the fully vaccinated route. I know some countries said we'll try and get everyone a first dose. Ireland kind of said no, we're gonna go by age, and we're gonna try and get people fully vaccinated. And so, yeah, it like essentially I believe, from what I understand, is certainly the over 60s, it's like 95% uptake, and people are fully vaccinated. It's still the group, I suppose, younger people, the kind of 18 to 34 age group, that are probably the group that, through no fault of their own, just haven't had access to the vaccine. Now, in the last few weeks, that has begun to change, and so that group have begun to be offered the Johnson & Johnson vaccine in pharmacies. But the government announced this prior to telling the pharmacies. So there was this huge rush as people contacted the pharmacies to say, hey, I understand that you get the vaccine, and the pharmacies like, well, hang on, we need to get the details. Anyway, so there was kind of mass panic for a day, then they got it figured out. So it is rolling out, but we are also, I suppose, we're in a race against the Delta variant, and that's I suppose right now is what everyone is waiting on. I've had my first dose, but I haven't received the second dose as yet, and I think until I do, I would be wary of indoor gatherings. I think outdoor is, from all the research and everything I've seen, outdoor seems to be absolutely fine. So I'm having an outdoor summer, meeting friends outdoors, going to, pubs have outdoor seating and stuff like that. So taking advantage of that, and the fact that the weather has been pretty good this summer has definitely made a difference. But yeah, I think what we're likely to see is, as the vaccine continues to roll out, I think in terms of the adult uptake of the vaccine in Ireland, it will be about 90. It'll be above 90%, I would say.
Yeah, right. In our country we have Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Sinovac. Currently, we also recognize the J&J. As I understand, the J&J is actually tested. It's of course an American company. It's Johnson & Johnson, but it's actually tested in Africa, if not mistaken. Which, as we all understand, the virus that is more evolved or is more dangerous than any other country. Especially, there are also Ebola happening. There are also a ton of viruses or pandemic happening in that country, and I'm surprised that only now they are recognizing J&J. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's because of the number they say is about 60%, but they are testing it in a country where it's more dangerous than anywhere in the world. So that is something that surprised me a lot, you see. And yeah, for the student that actually study in Ireland, do they have the opportunity to actually get the vaccine, or it is something that only for the resident or the people of Ireland?
No, Ireland, I think, can be justifiably proud of its approach to international students and people from around the world during COVID. Now, that's not to say that mistakes weren't made in terms of nursing homes and things like that. That's separate. But in terms of students, a couple of examples come to mind. So international students who are or anyone in Ireland who's lost their job as a result of the pandemic were eligible for the pandemic unemployment payment, the PUP as it was called, PUP. And the PUP was it was €350 per week. International students who lost their job were eligible for the PUP as well. So it didn't matter where in the world you were from, if you lost your job, you were eligible for the PUP. Also, international students can work 20 hours a week during term in Ireland. So up to, so that they can work part-time essentially. During the pandemic, they were allowed to work full-time because it was recognized that if you were still employed, you were a key worker. Whether that was stacking the shelves or whatever, that was really important. You need to keep the economy going, needed to keep supermarkets going. So they were allowed to work full-time up to 40 hours a week. Now, they still had to maintain their studies, but they could. And I think that was really good. And also we provided free medical care. So if you needed to get a COVID test, that was free. If you were diagnosed with COVID, that medical treatment for international students again was free. And right now, for students who are in Ireland, they can access the vaccine for free. So I know I was actually on campus today. I met some students, they've registered, so they will be getting their vaccine. Because they're younger, they're in that cohort who are kind of waiting, but they will access it for free. So students will be able to access that, even the incoming cohort. Now, I suppose for some students, it's going to depend where they are in the world, because we do have mandatory hotel quarantine for some countries. So for some students, they will need, if they're coming from one of those countries, they will need to be vaccinated before they come. Otherwise, they'll have to undergo mandatory hotel quarantine. But for students coming from countries where the rate of COVID is low and they aren't vaccinated, those students will have access to it after they arrive in Ireland. So I do think Ireland can say that, look, it has been very good to people, no matter where they're from around the world, in its approach to the medical treatment and to ensuring, that everyone, I suppose, had access to resources and things like that.
Yeah, as you mentioned, you mentioned that international students will have free healthcare for the COVID. So, like normal before the COVID, do they also have the free healthcare, or is it something that only for COVID situation?
It's I suppose it's only like the free healthcare is only for COVID. So the Irish system is kind of confusing in that we have a public health system, but we also have a private health system. We have a kind of the two. But for international students, they have to have health insurance while they're studying. Now, what I will say is that I'm working in the sector a long time, and there've been some very sad cases when you work in the sector where you see students get sick, or unfortunately, tragically, we've had students have bad accidents and pass away. So the insurance is important in terms of, for the family that person's remains can be repatriated to their home country. But I would say for international students, the insurance tends to be things like a broken ankle, or a sports injury, because where an international student gets very sick with a long-term illness, let's say, they tend to go back to their home country, because that's where their supports are, and you want to be surrounded by your family and your friends and your traditional supports if you are sick. So say I would say if people are in Ireland, they have to have the medical insurance, but you wouldn't be left on the side of the road. If you fell over and you broke your arm, you would be treated, in a public hospital. It's just that there can be the wait for public hospitals can take a long time, but that is the drawback. But for COVID, they did make treatment free for COVID. And I suppose for a lot of the universities would have medical personnel on their campuses. So you can access like a student health service. So the cost might be free or might be reduced. And if you had to get prescription medicine, the cost might be free or might be reduced. So the universities do a lot themselves to try to assist students and to offset any of the costs, be it either physical health, mental health, anything like that. The university will endeavour to assist students and to help them through any medical needs that they have.
All right. Fully understand. So between the free healthcare is only for COVID, and they still need to pay if during the normal days, if they have any accidents or sicknesses. Yeah. So it's quite similar in our country. Of course, the insurance will kick in when it needs to. And fortunately, in my university time, I never have the opportunity to use the insurance, and that's an fortunate thing. Yeah. For your university, as I know, you are passionate in sport, in NFL, American football. And in your university, is there anything that is there any activities or sport club that actually doing that?
There isn't in DCU. There isn't an American football team any longer. There used to be, and I understand. It was before I joined the university, where actually I believe having somebody on our NFL podcast who played in DCU in the next few weeks. So hopefully I get to learn a bit more about it. I previously worked at both Trinity College Dublin and University College Dublin, and both of those had American football teams. And there are, I suppose, a number, like there's American Football Ireland, so there are clubs all around Ireland. So it's interesting that it is so popular. But sport is huge in Ireland, and we have our own national games called Gaelic football, which is like a cross between soccer and rugby, and also a sport called hurling. Now, hurling is the fastest field sport in the world. I would say to your listeners, they should go on YouTube and Google hurling. It's like field hockey mixed with lacrosse, mixed with roller derby, mixed with the crash test dummies. It is incredibly quick. It is you would have to see it to understand how it's played. But it's a great sport. Soccer is really popular here. Rugby is really popular here. So Irish people are definitely drawn to sport. I think I would have grown up playing any number of sports. So whenever sport is on television, I'll watch it, even if it's like cricket has grown in popularity in Ireland. So whatever it is, I will definitely watch it. I suppose soccer and the NFL are football, and the NFL are my two big loves. I travel to the UK to see football, and I travel to America to watch NFL games. So I have missed out on those opportunities as well over the last year, hoping that travel will again become possible over the course of the next few months.
Yeah, talking about just now the doubling the football plus rugby, the sport. So how is it work? The people are kicking the ball, or they are actually grabbing the ball and then hitting each other?
So with hurling, basically the ball is similar in size to a baseball or a field hockey ball, if you can imagine. But it's not quite as hard. You have a hurley, which is like a field hockey stick. You can pick that you can have the ball in your hand, and you can take 4 steps with it, and then you have to put it on your hurley. So you can't just have the ball in your hand and run down the field. You can balance it on your hurl and you can run down. Imagine like an egg and spoon race, if you have egg and spoon races in school. But people can come in and they can try to knock the ball off. I mean, it is very physical. You can shoulder people, so as long as you hit them shoulder to shoulder, that's fine. And obviously you can swing. It's not like field hockey where you can't have the hurley and swing it above your shoulder. You can do that. So what will happen is people will hit the ball, it'll go 60 yards down the field, and people will go up to contest the catch. So you'll have people going through the air and picking the ball, and somebody else, you can use their hurley. So now at the top level, again, you don't tend to get too many injuries because it is so skillful. And essentially you have, if you can imagine like a soccer or a football, a goal, but if the goalpost kept going up into the air. So in hurling and in Gaelic football, the scoring system is the same. If you score a goal, as you would do in football, you get 3 points. If you put it between the posts but over the bar, that's 1 point. So you can definitely score a large number of points, but if the other team gets goals, then that makes a big difference. And it's super popular. It's played all around the country. I mean, Gaelic football is probably the more popular of the two, but hurling is really popular in Cork, where I grew up. So I grew up loving hurling, and the All-Ireland finals take place. And what's interesting is Ireland isn't that big a country. The island, like, we've about 6 million people, but our national stadium for those two sports, Croke Park, holds about 87,000 people, or thereabouts. It's one of the largest stadiums in Europe, and they will be absolutely packed for those All-Ireland finals. Tickets are like gold dust, and all the counties take part, and they narrows down into 2 of them. Actually, London have a team as well, and New York have a team, so they compete as well. So who knows, maybe one day there'll be a team from Kuala Lumpur who'll take part in hurling or Gaelic football.
Yeah, I think I saw that before. It's basically like a net thing, which they actually throw it to each other. Am I right? The ball they just
it's similar. That's lacrosse. So
okay.
it's very similar to that, but it doesn't have the net, so it tends to be a bit quicker. But it's a similar sort of idea. Yes.
Yeah. And is it like in NFL, in football, we have the touchdown? You see, do they have that? Because I know that the goal that you say that shoot, that I saw before. People just kick the ball and then they need to go higher than the pool. Yeah, that I saw before. But then is that one of the thing about football is that people run. I'm not sure what do you call that, the sprinter or anything. They just run over the field and then they touch down. That's the golden moment, I would say, the moment of the day. Yeah. So is that something similar?
Not in Gaelic football or hurling, no. It's really based around the goals and the points, but people definitely celebrate the goals like quite intensely. Like scoring a goal is celebrated like a goal in soccer, like in the Premier League. Yeah,
and as I know, Ireland is a big. All right. How I know Ireland is a big sport country is actually from MMA, from McGregor. Everyone know Conor McGregor. So from him, I start to learn a bit about Ireland, about how big sport is for the country. However, it's surprising that American football usually will just be like the NBA, you know, is pro by the American itself. But I'm surprised how the American football actually influence, or how they actually get into Ireland. Because
yeah, so I think Ireland has always had a long history, a long relationship with America, dating all the way back to the Great Famine in Ireland back in the 1840s, and the number of Irish people who emigrated. Like, Irish people emigrated even before that, but they emigrated in such huge numbers during the famine that you ended up with huge Irish communities in America. And because of that, there has always been travel between the two countries, and there has always been interchange between the two countries. So you can see the Irish influence in America, and you can see the American influence in Ireland. Mm-hmm. And Ireland in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and even obviously before then, but used to be a very Catholic country. Mm-hmm. And there used to be in three pictures if you went to the 70s and the 80s in Ireland. There was a picture of Jesus Christ, there was a picture of the Pope, and there was a picture of JFK in every Irish household. JFK was like revered because he was considered an Irishman who became president of America. So that has always existed, and I think that is one of the reasons why the sport of American football has begun, that came to Ireland and has kind of grown in popularity.
Yeah, I think next big person other than JFK will be Conor McGregor. At the same time, Conor O'Brien. The talk show host. Yes. He has done a couple of episodes in the past where he has come to Ireland. Yes, we're definitely big fans of Conan. Yeah, looking for the route and ended up, the bar.
Indeed.
Yeah. So, right. Talking about sport. Recently we know that Conor McGregor actually broke his leg during a fight. So, as I understand, the Irish, there are a lot of crazy Irish fans. His friend, of course, is because he's representing Irish representing Ireland. But then for you, how do you see the whole crowd, the whole situation where Irish actually travel to America just to support him? We know that during his early day, he even sell out the arena. By the Irish fan actually buy all the ticket for the fight, and I think he also bring MMA to Ireland, which is something very very interesting, very impressive, I would say. Yeah. So how the Irish fan actually look at big sportmen like him, Conor McGregor, or the big sportmen in Ireland, and how sport actually influence the whole Irish. The Irish people.
Yeah, so I think probably what you would have seen. What is in, like, if we go back to particularly the late 80s, early 90s, Ireland, Jack Charlton became manager of the Irish football team, Irish soccer team, and we qualified for the European Championships in 1988, and then we qualified for the World Cup in 1990. And it's difficult to describe just how seminal a moment that was in Ireland, because we were less than 70 years on from a civil war at that point, and this really was a way of bringing the country back together again. And Ireland got out of the group stages and then beat Romania in the second round, lost to Italy in the quarterfinals, but we celebrated as if we won the tournament. There's an Irish-American comedian who came to Ireland in July 1990, and he joked that he arrived in Ireland in July 1990, 3 weeks after we beat Romania on penalties, 4 weeks before we finished celebrating, which tells you how long the celebrations went on for. So that was a huge moment. It's still talked about in Ireland, and yeah, we absolutely we love the opportunity, I suppose, to get behind a successful person, a successful team. It has been slim pickings in many respects, because we are a small country, and I think because it's, there are so many different sports, it can be very difficult. Our rugby team has had some success in recent years. There are a couple of Grand Slam championships, which is where you beat England, you beat France, you beat Wales, Scotland, and Italy all in the same season. So we've had success there, but we've had disappointments at the World Cup. And in the Football World Cup, we unfortunately haven't qualified for a World Cup in quite some time. So I think probably Conor McGregor his success probably came at a time where Ireland was really hungry for some success. And he was, this brash and outspoken and entertaining and almost larger than life figure, particularly in his early on in his UFC career. And then there were, so it grew and grew, and Irish fans would go over, and like the state, like the arena where he was fighting, the weigh-in would be all Irish fans cheering and singing, and the same when he fought. It's probably it's difficult, I would imagine, to maintain your dedication when, like, he made, what did they say, 100 million from fighting Floyd Mayweather. How do you keep going back and want to get punched in the face? So I suppose the second half of his career hasn't probably lived up to the heights of the first half. And I wonder if we will see him back in the UFC. I'm not sure if we will. But for us, I think Ireland is waiting for its next sports superstar that it can really get behind. We don't have that person at the moment. We had it a little bit with golf. Padraig Harrington won a couple of majors. Rory McIlroy was obviously quite successful for a time. But right now we're in that little bit of a lull in terms of international sporting success. But like when Ireland do qualify, like a few years ago, again, we qualified for the European Championships, and we beat Italy to get into the second round, where unfortunately we lost to France. But that night when we beat Italy was just so much fun. Dublin was just a brilliant place to be. There were people were celebrating. Hopefully we can have something happen again, to really allow us to get back to a major tournament and to celebrate. But we do miss that, because it really it makes the summer when that is the case. Or if there's a new Conor McGregor, a new champion to come on and really take the mantle in the UFC or in boxing, that would be great to see as well.
Yeah, I mean, for a star like that to born a star like that is maybe one in a million. There are not much people like that. The last, like in football, we only have the most famous one. We have Ronaldo, we have Messi, but as you can see, like for example, like Messi is maybe one in the whole Argentina that is really that famous and that successful. And for maybe like UFC, the MMA world, one in Ireland that is really that successful. It's very hard. It's not just his skill, his knowledge, but then it's also how he entertains, how the personality, how dominant he is, how he acts, how he bring out the whole crowd, how he bring out the people, how he bring out the aura. So it's very hard to actually have this kind of people. It's really one in a million. We can see a lot of good fighter. I'm a big MMA fan. We can see a lot of big or good fighter in the UFC right now, you see. But then they do not have the aura like Conor McGregor. They have the skill, but they can't sell the ticket. That's the very important thing. You need to be skillful, you need to be good, but then at the same time, because it's on the live television, in a way you need to sell the ticket. You need to pop up. You need to hype up the hype. You see, we know Khabib, beat Conor McGregor. However, I will say he's not as successful as Conor McGregor because he might have the skill. He might be the world champion, but he still can't be that big, compared to Conor. So that's a very important thing. It's not just how good you are, but then how good you can sell the ticket, how good you can get the people to support you. Yeah, that's very important. And
you're absolutely. I think you're right. You're so right in that, and I think UFC is struggling at the moment because it doesn't have somebody who can really sell. And boxing struggled for a long time until Tyson Fury came along, and he has that kind of personality that people gravitate, that they want to watch, because I think part of it is the unexpected. You don't know what's going to happen next, for boxing, Tyson Fury and Wilder and Anthony Joshua, that has kind of led to renewed interest in boxing, which didn't exist for a time. I think, they definitely, UFC needs to find somebody, because I see that Nick Diaz is coming back to fight. I mean, Nick Diaz, I mean, the Diaz brothers are like incredible fighters, but Nick Diaz hasn't fought 6.5 years. I mean, UFC it feels almost like WWE wrestling, where they're bringing these older guys back just to try to sell tickets, and they need to cultivate and develop new fighters, and find a way to make that entertaining, because you can't keep rolling these late 30, 40 something year old guys out into the ring.
I mean, it's true that the recent year they really struggle on that. They can't find the star. Like what you say in boxing. Boxing is also, as I understand, boxing is also one of the big sport in Ireland. Previously, is something that the Irish proud of. You see, and I will say there are some emotional moments in the UFC, like the what do you call it, the Mexican champion right now. Basically, he I forget his name, but he won the championship, and he is the only Mexican champion right now after many years. But then it's still it's a one moment thing. How are you going to build up for the next fight? That's the key. You see, that's what it sells. And we'll see what will happen. It's very interesting. Like the Nick Diaz brother, they didn't. I think a trilogy will gonna happen after this again. McGregor versus the Diaz, but the Nick Diaz, and then we will see the television will start marketing. You start the promo. But it's very interesting to actually see him developing himself and what happening right now. And it kind of like open a new world for us to see professional fighting is not just fighting, but then it's also about entertainment. I think the last person in boxing, the last person that actually have this kind of aura is actually Mike Tyson, where when his young day, his early day, when he's very wild, he's very fiery. Everyone moved to boxing because they want to see Mike Tyson. All the trash talk, and then how he fight, going under and then just knock people out. So all this is actually very interesting for me, and for the sport world also. I don't see any kind of trash talking in other sport other than the MMA. maybe because in the MMA or fighting world, basically they are hitting each other. But then I don't see that in other sport, and it will be interesting to see to actually see, if this happened in another sport, then that would be very interesting. Imagine football player, trash talking, and then they just fight.
I like your idea, Jake. There might be something in that.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about your podcast. So your podcast is about NFL because you like it, right? So would you like to introduce that?
Yeah, sure. So it's the Irish NFL show. So I suppose it's an Irish take on the NFL, and we have been very fortunate that we've had some really great guests who've been willing to come on, current players, former players, coaches, media personalities. So I suppose if you've listeners who are interested in the NFL and they like hearing people with funny accents talk about it, they definitely, you can find us, I think. That one is a video podcast. We also do audio podcasts as well, but it is a video podcast. So you can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Twitter, the Irish NFL show. And we hope to do a couple of live shows in London to coincide with the games over there in October, COVID permitting, so fingers crossed on that. But it's a lot of fun and has been really insightful to get to talk to those kind of players and coaches. So that has really kind of taken off, I suppose, over the past year or so. I've been a Denver Broncos fan for, oh my goodness, 20, 30 years. But this is a relatively new, been doing Broncos podcast for a time, but to kind of cover the whole league is relatively new, but has been really, really enjoyable.
In football, specifically, the player, the body size itself is very strong. And, as we can see in American football, is mostly the Black American the majority of it, because the body structure is just big. They are just huge, and then they have the energy. For Ireland, is it something similar? It's more into the Black community, or it is actually played by the it's actually mixed, or what's this player? Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely in Ireland. It's played by it is mixed, I suppose. Ireland has a small but growing Black community, which is great. And we've had a Black community in Ireland, for a long time, and there's some really great and well-known Black Irish people. Phil Lynott from Thin Lizzy being probably one of the most famous. Paul McGrath, who was an Irish soccer player who went to the World Cup with us in 1990. But there's an entirely new generation of young Irish Black people now who are incredibly talented. Writers, musicians, poets, but also in terms of sport, we're beginning to see it. So there was an Irish athlete at the under-20 European Championships this evening who won the 100 meters, and she's a Black sprinter, but it's the first time Ireland has won a 100 meters title that I can ever remember. So I think it's fantastic to see that kind of continue to develop, but hopefully we can ensure that I suppose across all aspects of society, it's welcoming to everybody, and that it's not that this is seen as being for any particular ethnicity or anything like that, that whatever it is, it's open to everyone.
Yeah, of course it's always good to have everyone to participate in that, because at the end of the day, you are all Irish, you are all the people of Ireland. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, that's the one. That's what the most important thing is. All right. So, is there other thing that you would like to share about your podcast, or other things that you would like to share in for the Irish sport or anything?
Sure. I suppose if anyone is interested in higher education, works in higher education, is studying higher education, you can check out the Adventures in Advising podcast. That is just audio only. The podcast itself, though we do have a video series, but Adventures in Advising you can get on across all podcasting platforms. We also have a website. The IreNFL show has a website. So if you Google Adventures in Advising, if you Google IreNFL show, you'll find us there as well. And I suppose for anyone who's on social media, you can find me. I'm probably most active on Twitter at Colum from Cork. I post a lot on there, and I love getting in touch with people, hearing new stories, anything like that. So do get in touch. You can also find me on LinkedIn as well, Colum Cronin. So always delighted to chat to new people, hear new stories. That's what I think life is all about, really, is about stories and chatting to people. And I mean, that's why I was so happy to get the opportunity to come on to your podcast, Jake, and thank you again for the invite. It's been really fun to kind of, to get the opportunity to talk to you, hear a bit about your ideas, exchange ideas and things like that. So if there are listeners who want to get in touch, please do.
Right. Before we end, right, since you mentioned about studying in Ireland, right, just give the student a quick idea, right? How's the process for them to actually from Malaysia when they sign up for the classes and they study in Ireland, so in terms of the accommodation, how they're going to apply for the visa, and how is the whole process? Just can you just give a brief?
Sure. So the great news for students who hold a Malaysian passport is you don't need to get a visa in order to come to Ireland. You come to Ireland, you get a landing stamp, and you register after you start your studies in Ireland. So that's the good news. It's not like there's a big visa process or anything that you have to do. I think Ireland is a great place to study because it's a very safe place. I was talking before we started actually recording for the podcast, Jake, that Ireland is generally a very temperate climate, right? And so we never get crazy floods. We don't get any natural disasters, no earthquakes, no tornadoes. We don't even really have mosquitoes here, which is wonderful. And that means that it's a very walkable, whether you're in Dublin or Cork or Galway, you can always kind of get out and about, which is kind of a great thing. And I think even in Dublin, like I live in the city, and yet if I hop on public transport, within 20 minutes I can be by the beach, or I can be up in the mountains. And I think that's really lovely to have all of those options as well. Also, the fact that as a nation state, we're not even, we're just about 100 years old. We will be next year. But we have structures that predate the pyramids. So we're an interesting nation in that way. So for students who come to study in Ireland, it is a warm and friendly place. You will any institution where you go. Obviously, I think DCU is a wonderful institution, but I can say, like, I studied in UCC. I worked in other institutions. Ireland has a really strong higher education sector. So wherever you study, you'll get a good quality education. I think Dublin City University offers you a lot. But whatever the course is, whether it's medicine or whether it's tech, I think the opportunities after you complete your studies are manyfold. There are just so many wonderful opportunities, and you can take advantage of those. And in terms of accommodation, all the universities certainly will have on-campus accommodation options. I know sometimes some of the Malaysian students stay with Irish host families because that's a great way to get to know Ireland. And sometimes they get apartments themselves. So all of those are I suppose, on the table for whatever students want. And it's a relatively straightforward process, I think, in Ireland for students from Malaysia. Generally, when you apply, you'll get an offer in kind of 2 to 3 weeks, so you'll know where you stand and you can begin to make plans, for if you will be traveling to Ireland. But I think whether you're coming as a tourist or whether you're coming as a student or whether you're coming to work, Ireland is a great place to visit.
Right. For the accommodation, is it expensive in Ireland or is affordable? And as for example, like country like Japan, for you to rent a house, you need to give the owner a 3-month allowance, something like that. So is that something that happening in Ireland or yeah?
Sure. It's not cheap, I can tell you that. And I suppose it would be comparable probably to other European capitals. You don't have to pay a 3-month deposit. Generally, it's a 1-month deposit that you would pay. And I think probably though, because Dublin is now such a tech hub, like Dublin is the most expensive, the other cities, but that's because again, it's capital, it offers you these opportunities. So I suppose I think what's happened over recent times is Dublin, or campus accommodation in Dublin, has become much more sought after. If we went back to when I started my career 15 years ago, students felt campus, do I really want to live on campus? I kind of think I can probably find a place that'd be cheaper off campus. Now all of a sudden everyone wants to stay on campus. So it's definitely not cheap. I think the situation for students though has improved over the last few years. If we went back kind of 3 or 4 years, it was difficult for students, but there's a lot of now purpose-built student accommodation which has helped. Most of the universities have added additional beds on campus, building more, and I think you've seen more host families come in. So while it's, I would say accommodation is probably the biggest cost. I would say, like, I would travel to the United States quite a bit, and depending on where you are, like San Francisco is incredibly expensive, but I would say Dublin can be expensive for accommodation, but like the groceries, so if you were cooking yourself, groceries can be very reasonably priced in Ireland depending on where you shop. So I do think you can save money on the cost of living in other ways if you plan appropriately.
All right. So I would say that, of course, accommodation is something that is expensive, but then the living cost will be something that is affordable. And how about the money? Are they going to use euro to actually pay for their daily expenses currency? Is it euro or is that we are using the Irish dollar?
No, it's euro. So Ireland went with the euro when the euro actually began. So the nice thing about that is that I suppose if you do decide to go to visit Paris for the weekend, or because when we are beyond COVID, Ryanair is an airline in Ireland, in Europe, which allows for very cheap travel. So we would have students who go to Paris or go to Rome or go to Berlin or go to Barcelona for the weekend, and you don't have to change the money. They all use the euro as well. So that's a nice part, and I would definitely see a significant number of students do that and take advantage of that.
Yeah, people just travel around with the train, with the airplane, or yeah, some might also rent a car, but it might cost them a day to just reach a Euro country. All right, great. All right, thank you for joining the podcast. It's a wonderful talk with you, and yeah, thank you very much. And I will see you in the future.
Thank you very much, Jake.
Thank you.